The camp sat in a flat landscape of pine forest near the town of Sagan, in what is now Poland. Stalag Luft III was constructed in 1942 as a prisoner-of-war facility designed specifically to hold captured Allied Air Force officers. The barracks were arranged in compounds separated by wire fences. Guard towers occupied each corner, and the ground around the perimeter had been cleared of vegetation for nearly 100 meters in all directions. Searchlights swept the area at night. Dogs patrolled during the day. The commandant was a man named Friedrich von Lindener, a career officer who ran the camp with a particular emphasis on order and routine. The forest beyond the fence extended in all directions, eastward toward Russia, westward toward Germany proper, northward into the Baltic territories, southward toward Czechoslovakia. The nearest Allied lines were hundreds of miles away. The soil beneath the camp was sandy, which presented both advantage and obstacle. It was easy to dig through but prone to collapse. The water table lay relatively deep. Temperature in winter dropped well below freezing. In summer, the heat was substantial. The camp existed in a state of permanent surveillance and controlled movement. Prisoners lived in overcrowded wooden barracks. Food was rationed according to Geneva Convention minimums, never quite enough, always calculated to maintain health without strength. The days followed an identical pattern: roll call at dawn, work assignments or internal duties, a midday meal, afternoon hours in the compound, evening meal, lights out. Escape attempts occurred regularly. Most failed quickly. The successful ones were rare enough to be remembered. In the summer of 1943, a new group of prisoners arrived at the compound. Among them, a Royal Air Force officer named Roger Bushell. Bushell was 31 years old, intelligent, multilingual, and had already attempted escape twice before his arrival at Sagan. He had been captured after his fighter aircraft was shot down, spent time in other camps, and maintained an attitude that escape was not merely possible but necessary. Around him, a network of other officers began to form. They were British, American, Canadian, Australian, and Polish, all aircrew, all captured, all held under the same conditions of wire and guard and routine. What distinguished this group from others was the scale of ambition that began to crystallize around Bushell's thinking. Previous escape attempts had been individual or small group affairs. Bushell proposed something unprecedented: a coordinated mass escape involving hundreds of prisoners, coordinated routes, false documents prepared in advance, and a systematic tunneling operation that would be maintained in secret for however long it required. It was a vision that demanded absolute discipline, compartmentalized knowledge, and an acceptance that the operation might take not weeks but months or even years to complete. The operation was given a code name: the Great Escape. 3 tunnels would be dug simultaneously, nicknamed Tom, Dick, and Harry. Tom would serve as a decoy, deliberately discovered by the guards to satisfy their expectations that escape attempts were being made. Dick would serve as a secondary route. Harry would be the tunnel through which the actual escape would occur. The location chosen was beneath the floor of a barracks in the north compound, positioned so that the tunnel could run under the perimeter fence and emerge in the forest beyond the cleared zone. The work began in the spring of 1943. Officers were assigned specific roles. Some would dig. Some would haul sand away from the tunnel face in containers fashioned from torn clothing. Some would shore up the tunnel walls using bed boards and other scrap materials. Some would work on false papers. Some would acquire or manufacture compass needles from watch parts and stolen materials. Some would create forged documents using materials stolen from the camp administration office. Some would plan routes, memorize landscapes, prepare cover stories. The operation was divided into distinct departments, each with a leader responsible to Bushell. Security was maintained through need-to-know compartmentalization. Many prisoners in the camp had no idea that a tunneling operation of such magnitude was occurring beneath their feet. The actual digging began in April 1943. The entrance to Harry was hidden beneath a stove in the barracks. A wooden trapdoor was constructed and carefully concealed. Once a prisoner descended into the tunnel system, he entered a world that was entirely hidden from the guards and from most of the other prisoners. The tunnel itself was approximately 2 feet wide and just over 4 feet high, making movement an exercise in continuous crouch and crawl. The sand walls were shored up with wood pieces acquired from various sources: bed boards, floorboards, materials salvaged from damaged barracks. As the tunnel extended deeper into the earth, ventilation became an increasingly critical problem. Air became stale, oxygen depleted. To address this, the prisoners fashioned a system using improvised bellows, a kit bag fitted with valves created from old tins, to pump fresh air through a tube made from tin cans placed end to end. Without this ventilation system, men working at the face of the tunnel would have lost consciousness within minutes. The daily routine of the digging operation established itself across the months of spring and summer 1943. Each day, workers would enter the tunnel in shifts. One man would dig at the face, loosening sand with a small tool made from wood or scraps of metal. Other men would fill containers with the excavated sand. These containers would be passed back along the tunnel in a human chain, moving hand to hand from the tunnel face to the entrance shaft. Above ground, the sand posed a problem. Approximately 2 cubic meters of sand would need to be disposed of each day the digging continued. That volume of sand could not simply be thrown into the general camp area without being noticed. Instead, a dispersal system was organized. Prisoners would walk in the compound during authorized recreation periods, and those wearing specially designed bags would release sand in controlled quantities through small holes sewn into the bottoms of their trousers, distributing it gradually across the camp grounds, mixing it with existing soil. This process required an almost inconceivable coordination and discipline. Sand had to be distributed evenly enough that no suspicious mounds appeared, but consistently enough that the digging could continue. The psychological weight of the operation accumulated with the passage of time. Security was paramount. The Germans conducted surprise searches of the barracks. Tunnel entrances had to be so perfectly concealed that discovery seemed nearly impossible. The stove beneath which Harry's entrance was hidden was used regularly for cooking. Guards inspected barracks. German officers conducted roll calls twice daily. At any moment, the entire operation could be discovered, and those involved would face courts-martial, execution, or transfer to more severe camps. Yet the digging continued. By summer 1943, the tunnel extended nearly 80 feet toward the fence line. By autumn, it extended past 100 feet. The work never stopped. Even as winter approached and the temperature dropped, the digging continued, though the frozen ground made the work more difficult. In October 1943, the Germans discovered Tunnel Tom. The discovery was something of a relief. The guards felt they had found the escape attempt. Security was tightened briefly, but after a short period, routines returned to normal. The prisoners knew that the discovery of Tom actually provided cover for the continued work on Harry and Dick. The Germans believed they had solved the problem. Tom was destroyed. The tunnel Dick was abandoned as unnecessary. All effort and focus concentrated on Harry. By the winter of 1943 and into 1944, Harry extended over 200 feet. The tunnel was now approaching the perimeter fence. The digging continued through the months of January, February, and March 1944, with the tunnel eventually reaching a length of approximately 336 feet. The entrance remained hidden beneath the stove. The ventilation system continued to function. The dispersal of sand continued daily. Thousands of individual actions, repeated day after day, month after month, coordinated in absolute secrecy. The preparation for the escape itself involved far more than simply digging the tunnel. Detailed plans were made for routes that escapees would follow once they had exited the tunnel. Maps were forged or memorized. Compasses were manufactured from stolen watch parts. Identity papers were created using forged documents based on stolen originals. The documents were remarkably detailed: travel passes, work permits, ration cards. The photographs were obtained by exchanging real photographs for ones created, using materials stolen from the camp. Civilian clothing was assembled, piece by piece, from materials acquired through various means. British, American, and Canadian uniforms would be altered to approximate civilian dress. Colors would be carefully matched using dyes made from improvised sources. The scale of preparation was extraordinary. An escape committee was established with clear authority and decision-making power. It was headed by Bushell and included officers from multiple nationalities. The committee established rules. There would be no violence against guards. Escape would be by stealth and planning, not by force. Those selected to escape would be chosen based on various criteria: language ability, physical fitness, previous military intelligence value, and overall capacity to survive the journey. Priority would be given to those who had specific destinations or information to convey to Allied forces. It was estimated that approximately 250 prisoners had been involved in the planning and preparation, but only a limited number could actually escape through the tunnel. It was decided that the first night of escape, 200 men would be sent through. Additional groups might follow in subsequent nights if the tunnel remained undiscovered. The date of the escape was set for March 1944. The tunnel had been completed. All preparations were in place. The men selected for escape were ready, their false documents prepared, their routes memorized, their civilian clothing assembled. The moment that had been planned and prepared for across 18 months was approaching. On March 24, 1944, the tunnel was opened. The first prisoners began to move through it under cover of darkness. The exit point in the forest had been carefully selected, emerging from the tunnel near a copse of trees approximately 200 feet beyond the fence line. The first men moved through quickly and disappeared into the darkness. The operation appeared to be proceeding as planned. By morning, between 70 and 80 prisoners had successfully exited the tunnel and moved away from the camp into the surrounding landscape. What followed was a systematic recapture. The alarm was raised by the German guards when the tunnel was discovered early on the morning of March 25. Within hours, a massive manhunt was organized. German police, military units, and civilian authorities were mobilized. Prisoners who had escaped began to be apprehended almost immediately. Most had not moved far from the camp. Some were caught before they had traveled even a few kilometers. Others made progress on foot or by jumping trains, but the scale of the manhunt and the nature of the occupied German landscape made successful escape extraordinarily difficult. Accounts suggest that of the 76 men who successfully exited the tunnel, 73 were recaptured within the following days and weeks. Only 3 men, a Dutch officer named Bram van der Stok, a Norwegian named Jens Muller, and a French officer named Pierre Richetet, successfully reached the Swiss border or Allied forces and survived to the end of the war. The recaptured prisoners were returned to the camp or transferred to other facilities. 50 of them were executed by the German Gestapo under orders from Hitler himself. The executions occurred in small groups over the following months. Word of the executions filtered back to the camp and to the outside world. The Great Escape, which had taken 18 months of planning and preparation, had resulted in a partial and ultimately tragic outcome. The 3 successful escapes represented a victory of sorts, but they were far outnumbered by those who had been recaptured and killed. What remained after the escape was the evidence of what humans could accomplish through sustained discipline, coordination, and the refusal to accept confinement. The tunnel itself, before it was filled in by the Germans, represented an extraordinary feat of engineering and human cooperation. It was 336 feet long, dug entirely by hand using improvised tools, maintained under conditions of absolute secrecy, and coordinated across a network of prisoners who had never been trained in tunneling or escape operations. The ventilation system was ingenious. The sand dispersal system was methodical and patient. The forged documents were of professional quality. The coordination across thousands of individual actions was near perfect. In a context where success meant freedom and failure meant death, the prisoners had executed a plan of remarkable complexity and ambition. The historical record suggests that the escape strengthened German security measures, but also strengthened prisoner morale. The knowledge that escape was possible, that resistance to captivity was actively being practiced, spread through the prisoner of war network. The Great Escape became a symbol of defiance, of the refusal to accept the dehumanizing logic of confinement. 18 months of digging beneath the earth, done in secrecy and danger, had produced a moment of extraordinary human effort. Even if the immediate outcome was capture and death for most of those involved, the 3 men who did escape became proof that the entire operation had not been futile. They carried news of the camp, information about German operations, and the testimony of what prisoners had accomplished through coordination and discipline. In the larger context of the war, their information contributed to the overall picture of German logistics, movements, and intentions. The tunnel itself exists now only in photographs, diagrams, and the testimony of those who worked on it. The camp was liberated by Soviet forces in January 1945 and later dismantled. The forest has grown back, the landscape has healed. But the record of what was accomplished in that tunnel, the evidence of human capability, organization, and the will to resist, remains documented and remembered. The Great Escape stands as a historical marker of what prisoners of war attempted, what they risked, and what cost they paid for the effort to reclaim their freedom.